Oh, so you heard what they've been calling you behind closed doors? Unhinged, strategic, dangerous, all in the same breath. All with that nervous laugh that people do when they're trying to convince themselves they're not terrified. Welcome to the most exclusive club on earth, the one where your enemies can't decide if you're crazy or calculated, if you're broken or brilliant, if you're losing it or if you've already won. And here's the beautiful, twisted truth. When they can't categorize you, when they can't fit you into their tiny little boxes of understanding, when their brains short-circuit trying to decode whether you're the victim or the villain, that's when you know you've transcended their entire game. That's when you know you've become something they never prepared for. Let's break down what just happened to you, because this isn't random. This isn't some accident of gossip. This is the exact moment when you became too powerful for their comprehension, too complex for their simple narratives, too evolved for their primitive understanding of human nature. When someone calls you unhinged, they're saying you've broken free from the chains they thought would hold you forever. When they call you strategic, they're admitting you're 10 moves ahead, and they just realized they've been playing checkers while you've been playing chess. When they call you dangerous, oh, that's the sweetest confession of all. Because what they really mean is, we can't control this person anymore, and that terrifies us to our core. You're not just living rent-free in their heads anymore. You've built an entire empire in there, and they're paying you in fear. Here's what happened. You stopped being predictable. You stopped responding the way broken people are supposed to respond. You stopped crying at their feet, stopped begging for their approval, stopped showing up to the emotional manipulation sessions they disguised as conversations. You went quiet, and that silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. It was you pulling back to observe, to study, to understand the entire game they thought they were winning. And while they celebrated what they thought was your defeat, while they threw their little victory parties thinking you were destroyed, you were in the darkness sharpening every single blade they tried to stab you with. You were taking notes. You were studying their patterns, memorizing their weaknesses, understanding exactly how they operate. And now you've emerged, and you're not the same person they thought they buried. The unhinged part, let's talk about that, because that's their favorite word for anyone who refuses to play by the rules of a rigged game. You know what unhinged really means in their language? It means you stopped pretending. It means you stopped wearing the mask they needed you to wear, so they could feel comfortable. It means you stopped moderating your truth, stopped dimming your light, stopped making yourself smaller so they could feel bigger. When they call you unhinged, they're really saying, this person is authentic in a world where we're all performing. And that authenticity is making us realize how fake we are, and we hate them for it. You became too real for their fantasy. You became too honest for their lies. You became too free for their prison. And now they're trying to make freedom sound like madness, because if freedom is madness, then their cage sounds safe. But here's where it gets delicious. Here's where the contradiction in their words reveals everything. How can you be both unhinged and strategic? How can you be simultaneously out of control and 10 steps ahead? How can you be crazy and calculated at the exact same time? You can't. Those words contradict each other, and that contradiction exists because their minds are breaking trying to understand you. They're experiencing cognitive dissonance in real time. Their brains are literally malfunctioning because you don't fit their narrative. You're supposed to be either the emotional mess or the cold manipulator. You're supposed to be either the victim crying in the corner or the villain laughing maniacally. But you're both. You're neither. You're something they never encountered before. Something that doesn't exist in their limited playbook of human behavior. You cried, yes. You felt everything, yes. You were vulnerable, absolutely. But you were also watching. You were also learning. You were also calculating every single move while your tears were still wet on your face. That's what they can't comprehend. That's what breaks their brain. They think emotion equals weakness and strategy equals coldness. but you proved that you can be emotionally intelligent and strategically brilliant. You can feel everything and still see everything. You can be hurt and still be steps ahead. You can be healing and still be winning. And that combination, that beautiful, terrifying combination of heart and mind working together instead of fighting each other, that's what makes you dangerous. Not dangerous in the way they want to paint you. Dangerous in the way that threatens their entire system of control. Let me tell you exactly what happened in their group chats, in their whispered conversations, in those late-night calls where they tried to figure you out. First, they called you weak. Remember that. They saw your pain and mistook it for powerlessness. They saw your tears and thought they'd won. They watched you retreat and threw a party thinking you'd never return. But then something shifted. Then you started moving different. Then you stopped responding to their provocations. Then you stopped explaining yourself. Then you stopped showing up to arguments you never started. And suddenly, they got nervous. Suddenly, the word weak didn't fit anymore. Suddenly, they had to upgrade their assessment. Suddenly, you became calculated. Suddenly, you became strategic. Suddenly, the person they thought was defeated started looking like someone who was just observing, studying, waiting. And that's when the fear crept in, because fear is just respect that hasn't admitted itself yet. When they started calling you strategic, what they meant was, we thought we knew this person's next move, and now we realize we never did. We thought we had them figured out, and now we realize they were figuring us out the entire time. Your silence wasn't confusion, it was calculation. Your absence wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Your lack of reaction wasn't defeat, it was discipline. And they finally realized that every time they thought they were winning, you were letting them reveal themselves. Every time they thought they had you cornered, you were gathering information. Every time they thought they'd broken you, you were becoming unbreakable. The student became the teacher. The observed became the observer. The prey became the predator. But they still needed one more word, didn't they? Strategic wasn't enough. Unhinged wasn't enough. They needed something that captured the full scope of what you'd become, something that expressed the threat level you now represented to their peace of mind. Dangerous. That's the word they landed on. Dangerous. Not because you're violent, not because you're cruel, but because you're free, free from their opinions, free from their judgments, free from their manipulation, free from their control. And free people are the most dangerous people to those who profit from keeping others caged. You're dangerous because you can't be bought. You're dangerous because you can't be broken. You're dangerous because you learned their language, studied their tactics, understood their game, and decided you're not playing anymore. Here's what they don't understand. What they'll never understand until it's too late. You're not dangerous to them. You're dangerous for you. The danger isn't that you're going to destroy them. The danger is that you've already destroyed the version of yourself that needed them. You've already killed the part of you that sought their validation. You've already buried the person who showed up begging for scraps of their approval. That person is gone, dead, never coming back. And that's what haunts them. Because as long as you needed them, they had power. As long as you cared what they thought, they had leverage. As long as you were trying to prove yourself to them, they had control. But the moment you stopped caring, the moment you stopped explaining, the moment you stopped performing, you took all their power and converted it into your fuel. You want to know the exact moment they realized they'd lost? It wasn't when you fought back. It wasn't when you defended yourself. It wasn't when you tried to prove them wrong. It was when you stopped doing all of that. It was when you went so quiet that the silence became deafening. It was when you became so unreachable that they started reaching. It was when you became so indifferent that they became desperate for your attention. See, they were prepared for war. They had their weapons ready. They had their attacks lined up. They had their manipulations prepared. But you didn't show up to the battlefield. You didn't give them the war they wanted. You gave them something far worse: irrelevance. You made them irrelevant in your story. And for people whose entire identity was built on being central to your narrative, that's a fate worse than any confrontation. Now they're stuck in this loop, this beautiful, torturous loop, where they can't stop talking about you, but they also can't understand you. They describe you with contradictions because you are a contradiction to everything they thought they knew. You're soft but strong. You're kind but firm. You're forgiving but you don't forget. You're peaceful but you're not passive. You love but you have boundaries. You're open but you're not available to everyone. You're the paradox they never learned to solve, the equation that doesn't compute in their limited understanding of mathematics. And every time they try to put you in a box, every time they try to slap a label on you, every time they try to reduce you to a single word, you expand, you evolve, you transcend, you become more. Let's talk about what Unhinged really reveals about them, not you. When someone calls another person unhinged, it's because that person has stepped outside the agreed-upon social contract of fake niceness and comfortable lies. It means you stopped pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. It means you stopped smiling at people who stabbed you in the back. It means you stopped attending family dinners with people who gossiped about you in the kitchen. It means you stopped being professional with colleagues who were professionally undermining you. It means you stopped being mature about situations that required you to be a doormat. Unhinged doesn't mean you're crazy. Unhinged means the hinges that kept you attached to their dysfunction, to their toxicity, to their manipulation. Those hinges finally broke and you're free now. They needed those hinges. They needed you attached to their door. They needed you to keep coming back, keep showing up, keep participating in the cycle. Because as long as you were hinged to their system, they could open and close you at will. They could use you when convenient and shut you out when you became inconvenient. They could swing you back and forth between hope and disappointment, between acceptance and rejection, between love and abandonment. But unhinged means those days are over. Unhinged means you're no longer the door they can control. You're the storm they can't predict. You're the force they can't contain. You're the element they can't manipulate. And that's not madness. That's liberation. That's evolution. That's you finally becoming the person you were always meant to be before they tried to construct you into something manageable. The strategic accusation is even more revealing because it admits something they wish they could take back. You're smarter than they thought. You're more aware than they assumed. You're more capable than they gave you credit for. When they call you strategic, they're confessing that they underestimated you, and that underestimation cost them everything. They thought they were the chess players, and you were the pawn. They thought they were the authors, and you were the character they could write into any plot. They thought they were the directors, and you were the extra in the background of their story. But strategic means you were writing your own script the entire time. Strategic means you were directing your own movie while they thought they had the camera. Strategic means you were playing your own game while they thought you were a piece in theirs. You know what's beautifully ironic about being called strategic? It's usually said with contempt, as if strategy is a dirty word, as if planning is somehow wrong, as if thinking ahead makes you manipulative. But let's be clear. The only people who have a problem with you being strategic are the people whose strategies failed against yours. The only people who complain about you thinking ahead are the people who can't keep up. The only people who call planning manipulative are the people whose manipulations you saw coming from miles away. They're not actually mad that you're strategic. They're mad that your strategy worked and theirs didn't. They're not actually upset that you planned. They're upset that they didn't plan for you to plan. They thought they were the only ones with a strategy, and the revelation that you had one too, one that was better than theirs, that shattered their entire perception of reality. Here's the thing about being called dangerous. Dangerous to who? Dangerous for what? You're not dangerous to innocent people. You're not dangerous to genuine souls. You're not dangerous to people who operate with integrity. You're only dangerous to liars, manipulators, energy vampires, and people who profit from chaos. You're dangerous to fake friendships built on gossip. You're dangerous to toxic family dynamics that require a scapegoat. You're dangerous to workplace politics that thrive on drama. You're dangerous to relationships that need you to stay small. You're not dangerous in general. You're specifically dangerous to anything that isn't serving your highest good. And that's the kind of dangerous the world needs more of. That's the kind of dangerous that changes lives. That's the kind of dangerous that breaks generational curses. They want you to feel ashamed of being called dangerous, but you should wear it like armor, because the same people calling you dangerous are the same people who stayed silent when you were being destroyed. The same mouths forming the word dangerous are the same mouths that smiled in your face while plotting behind your back. The same voices expressing concern about your dangerous behavior are the same voices that whispered about your downfall. So when they call you dangerous, translate that correctly. They're saying you're no longer controllable. They're saying you're no longer predictable. They're saying you're no longer the person they could manipulate with guilt, obligation, or fear. And that's not something to apologize for. That's something to celebrate. Let me paint you a picture of what happened behind the scenes, in the moments you weren't there to witness. Picture them sitting around, trying to make sense of your transformation. Someone says, they're just being emotional, they'll calm down. But you don't calm down in the way they expect. You calm down by cutting them off entirely. So someone else says, they're being calculated, they're planning something. But you're not planning revenge, you're planning your peace. Then someone else says, they're dangerous, we need to be careful. But you're not dangerous to them unless they try to re-enter your life. You're just dangerous to the narrative they created about you. You're dangerous to the lies they told themselves. You're dangerous to the comfort they found in your dysfunction. The confusion in their assessment of you, the contradiction in their words, that's the sound of cognitive dissonance. That's the sound of reality not matching their expectations. That's the sound of someone trying to explain something that doesn't fit into their understanding of how things work. Because in their world, people are simple. In their world, you're either strong or weak, smart or dumb, good or bad. But you showed up as strong in your vulnerability, smart in your silence, good in your boundaries. You showed up as a complex human being in a world that wanted you to be a simple character. And complex characters can't be easily described. Complex characters require nuance, depth, understanding. But they don't have that capacity. So they throw words at you hoping something sticks, hoping they can reduce you to something manageable, hoping they can make sense of what doesn't make sense. But here's what you need to understand. Their inability to categorize you is not your problem. Their confusion about who you are is not your responsibility to clarify. Their discomfort with your complexity is not your cue to simplify yourself. You are not required to make yourself digestible to people who never had the appetite for your truth anyway. You are not required to dim your multifaceted nature so they can see you clearly with their limited vision. You are not required to become one-dimensional so they can understand you with their one-dimensional thinking. Let them be confused. Let them contradict themselves. Let them struggle to put you in a box. Meanwhile, you keep expanding. You keep evolving. You keep becoming more of who you authentically are. The moment you accept that you'll never make sense to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, that's the moment you become truly free. The moment you stop trying to correct their perception, stop trying to prove them wrong, stop trying to show them who you really are, that's the moment you reclaim all the energy you've been wasting on people who will never appreciate it anyway. See, they don't want to understand you. They want to underestimate you. They don't want clarity about who you are. They want confirmation of who they need you to be for their narrative to work. And when you stop giving them that confirmation, when you stop playing the role they assigned you, when you stop being the character they wrote, that's when the accusations start flying. Unhinged, strategic, dangerous. Let's reclaim these words right now, because in the right context, these are compliments disguised as criticisms. Unhinged from their toxic expectations? Good. Strategic about protecting your peace? Excellent. Dangerous to their comfort zones built on your compliance? Perfect. You're not what they're calling you. You're what they're afraid you've become. Uncontrollable, unpredictable, unavailable for their games. That's the real trinity they're describing. That's the actual transformation they're witnessing. That's the evolution they're trying to stop by making it sound negative. But you can't stop evolution by calling it names. You can't stop growth by labeling it as dangerous. You can't stop someone's awakening by calling them unhinged. Here's what they'll never tell you, what they'll never admit even to themselves. They're jealous. Behind every criticism is a confession of envy. Behind every attempt to diminish you is their acknowledgement that you've grown beyond their reach. Behind every word meant to make you feel small is their fear that you're becoming too big for them to manage. They're jealous of your freedom while they're still imprisoned by what people think. They're jealous of your authenticity while they're still performing for approval. They're jealous of your peace while they're still addicted to drama. They're jealous of your growth while they're still stagnant. So they dress up their jealousy in concern, wrap their envy in criticism, disguise their fear in judgment. You want proof they're obsessed with you? They're still talking about you. After all this time, after all this distance, after all this silence from your end, they're still talking about you. You're living your life, focused on your path, building your future, and they're in group chats dissecting your every move. You're healing in private, and they're analyzing your healing in public. You're moving forward, and they're stuck in the past trying to figure out what happened. That's not indifference. That's not someone who's moved on. That's someone who's haunted by the person they thought they defeated who somehow came back stronger. That's someone who's tortured by the reality that you didn't need them to recover, didn't need their apology to move forward, didn't need their validation to know your worth.